Slingek nach Ginugech Yuchat Duasak, Blakek nach Michaela Mitchell Yuchat Duasak, Yeth na Hatsati, Deshitan Ayachat, Hutsnuakwan Yeth Hit Dach Ayachat. In Slingek, my name is Ginugech. In English, my name is Michaela Mitchell. I am of the Raven moiety and the Deshitan clan. My ancestors come from the village of Angoon, Alaska, in the Raven House. I am also a student at Southern Oregon University in Ashland, Oregon. I'm a psychology major and a Native American Studies minor.
My preferred name is Tiffany Fletcher, and I am a senior year psychology and mathematics student at Southern Oregon University. Michaela and I will be exploring how biocultural sovereignty is impacted by tourism as experienced by Southeast Alaskan cultures. To add clarification, biocultural sovereignty can be described as the environmental autonomy and associated cultural livelihood belonging to a person or group of people. Components of biocultural sovereignty include natural resource management and development such as hunting, fishing, harvesting, and respect for religious freedoms.
These resources are managed by the 13 Native corporations in Alaska. We'll be focusing on 2 that exist in Southeast Alaska to serve the Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian tribes, Goldbelt Incorporated and Sealaska Corporation. Alaska has a system of Native corporations instead of reservations to keep the tribal land and tribal government separate, as well as represent the tribes of Alaska politically. This was made possible through the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act of 1971, or ANCSA as I'm going to call it. This was the official acknowledgement of the indigenous people having at least some right to the land and its resources. This was a really big unresolved issue for a really long time, not just since Alaska was bought from Russia in 1867, but also before then when natives had to handle hostilities and invasions from Russia.
Today we're going to cover the modernization of these corporations and topics including biocultural sovereignty and a little about tourism. With regards to tourism in particular, there have been some controversy surrounding it in Southeast Alaska, which also impacts the relationships of these things. It's no longer 1971. A lot of things have changed in the world that the corporations have to adapt to, overcome, and ideally use to their advantage, which is not necessarily an easy thing to do. Tourism is a great example of that, and what the Native corporations do has changed a lot over the years. For example, Sealaska only owns 2.4% of the actual land, so a lot of the things that they have fought for are not always tangible things like land. Additionally, there's also the power to govern, to incorporate indigeneity in the school systems, to keep the languages alive, and to ensure the adaptive prosperity of the people with job training and education.
Sealaska, along with the rest of the Native corporations in Alaska, invested a very large amount of money in all these things to help restore pride in our cultures and communities. Sealaska operates a subsidiary called the Sealaska Heritage Institute, or SHI, which is run by a very well-respected Tlingit elder, Rosita Worrell. We were actually able to conduct an interview with her over email, which we will discuss more later. But SHI, what they do is they work with education systems, run a scholarship program for Alaska Native college students, support local formline artists for the revitalization of art and language, operate a research center on Alaska Native culture, and host cultural events like Celebration. And that is this huge celebration of the survivance of our people that is held every summer in my hometown, Juneau, where dance groups come from all over the state for singing, dancing, and food. Sealaska also partakes somewhat in the timber industry. From an outside perspective, that might kind of seem controversial, but what most people don't know is that they harvest the timber in a way that's very sustainable by practicing silviculture. That is the controlled growth and harvest of timber in such a way that makes a sustainable harvest system. On top of all of that, Sealaska also works with the 8A Business Development Program, which allows natives to learn from other business experts and hire mentors for trade jobs like construction. This is actually a great way to demonstrate contemporary biocultural sovereignty because it encourages Native people to participate in society in meaningful ways that they may not otherwise be able to if the corporations had never existed, while maintaining and using their cultural values. Goldbelt does plenty of similar things, but they also have more involvement in tourism than Sealaska does. But we'll talk about that later. I just want to illustrate what the Native Corps do, since people who aren't from Alaska tend to get the wrong idea just from the word corporation.
Thanks for explaining and clarifying what Native corporations are. I understand that you participated in an internship at Goldbelt Heritage Foundation last summer. Would you be down to talk a little bit about what that experience was like for you?
So last summer I had an internship with Gold Belt Heritage Foundation. They are a subsidiary of Gold Belt that runs a scholarship program, and they support local and economic development opportunities. They advocate for the preservation and advancement of Alaska Native art, culture, and language. Gold Belt Heritage Foundation also advocates for education and job training in addition to documenting and preserving historic sites. We ran a couple camps for the kids too. One was children ages 5 to 12, and about 80 kids showed up every day, Monday through Friday, for like 2 weeks. I, with the help of a handful of high schoolers, was in charge of about 20 fourth and fifth graders specifically. We taught them how to sew and we made leg warmers, tote bags, headbands with Tlingit designs on them. There was a lot of singing and dancing in Tlingit. We made jam. We did a few writing prompts. And it also happened to be the sunniest 2 weeks in Juneau we had that summer. We also got to play in the park next to the salmon hatchery, and it was just it was a blast. The second camp was an overnight camp for middle schoolers. I was an overnight chaperone with a cabin of about 13 girls. This also happened to be during the rainiest week of summer. There was a lot of the same singing and dancing, but the campers got to make their own drums and moccasins, which were a big hit. They also got a Tlingit language lesson by Joseph Marks and his dad Paul Marks, which was the most well put together language lesson I have ever seen. I don't really have very much knowledge to compare these camps to with like camps in the continental US with other Native American tribes, but I was truly blown away by our tribe's ability to successfully not only teach but to inspire the children to learn more. Midway through the week, the kids were actually leading song and dance for like an hour after the chaperone stopped because they wanted to keep going all night, and it was a really beautiful and hopeful experience.
As briefly mentioned previously, we were fortunate enough to be able to engage in email correspondence with Rosita Worrell, who is the president of Sealaska Heritage Institute in Juneau, Alaska. Rosita served as chair for the Alaska Federation of Native Subsistence Committee for 17 years, which defended hunting, fishing, and gathering rights. They also fought to amend the Alaska State Constitution and ANCSA, which took away those rights. We reached out to Rosita Worrell to obtain an authentic perspective on the impact of tourism on biocultural sovereignty and self-autonomy in Southeast Alaska and how Sealaska Corporation is involved. The following questions were posed to Rosita via email, to which she quickly and thoroughly detailed her responses and sent them to both Michaela and I. For the purpose of communicating the thoughts that she shared, I'll be presenting the questions one at a time, and Michaela will be responding in place of Rosita. So the first question we're going to get rolling here is, to establish a baseline understanding, would you be able to explain what biocultural sovereignty means to you?
Biocultural sovereignty means maintaining indigenous rights to harvest, utilize, and distribute resources from our land, and to maintain our spiritual relationship to the land and the beings of the earth. We have lived on this land since time immemorial, and we are one with the land.
Fabulous. While keeping the concept of biocultural sovereignty in mind, we will turn our attention to the canon of literature surrounding Alaskan tribal governments that does not tell of their accomplishments to protect political rights or promote self-determination. What actions has Sealaska taken to promote and protect?
So Sealaska is a major leader with tackling these issues by fighting for subsistence rights, voting rights, especially to those natives who were born after ANCSA in 1971, and special rights for elders. We have established land banks to protect our rights and are currently supporting and lobbying for the conveyance of lands to the 5 landless villages in Southeast Alaska and land allotments for veterans who served in the Vietnam War.
Nice, that's super interesting. Would you be able to explain why Sealaska is not more heavily involved with the tourism industry?
Yeah, so tourism was already heavily controlled by the cruise industry when Sealaska began its investments. The cruise industry has a very strong hold on tourist opportunities. It would take a very significant investment to buy out the cruise lines, and most of the other opportunities are small-scale tourist investments.
So when it comes to sovereignty, what is the biggest obstacle Alaska Natives face today, and how should this issue be addressed?
The state of Alaska has resisted recognition of tribes as sovereign entities, but we have slowly gained recognition. The State House just formed a Tribal Affairs Committee, which is a historic move. Rosita testified very recently, on March 7th, 2019, in fact, and recommended that the committee create a state tribal affairs office to establish consultation and collaboration procedures with tribes based on the federal executive order. This requires consultation with tribes, while the Federal Legislative Act requires consultation with Alaska Native corporations, which are recognized as tribes for special statutory purposes in over 120 federal acts, but not for governance purposes.
So, what do you believe your ancestors would think about the current methods employed regarding the corporations, tourism, and cultural affairs?
Our ancestors were very wise in teaching us that we needed to adapt to many of the Western ways, but also ensure our cultural survival by integrating our cultural values and practices into institutions that serve Native people. Our historic leaders saw the value of corporations and that we would own and control land under fee simple title and not be subjected to the federal government, which did not always act in the best interest of the tribes.
So, for those of you who are familiar with Brian Brayboy's tribal critical race theory, one of the foundational tenets states that stories are not separate from theory. Is there a Tlingit story that stands out to you that relates to management of the land?
Rosita said that she would like to tell the story of Dolores Churchill about natural and cultural sustainability. As she was gathering spruce roots for her basketry, she said, "Oh, how our ancestors must have loved us. They didn't take all of the roots, but left enough roots for the tree to survive so that we of later generations could gather spruce roots too." Rosita has also included the core cultural values that have sustained and guided us through thousands of years. She believes that we can see the seeds of biocultural sovereignty in them. They are Ha'ani, our land, which is our ancestors who have lived on this land for more than 10,000 years, taught us that everything has a spirit. The next one is Ha-Shuk'a, the past, present, and future generations. This is honoring our ancestors and future generations. We maintain strong bonds with our ancestors, whom we honor through our lives and in our ceremonies. Ha-Latsin, our strength, which is strength of body, mind, and spirit. The way of the warrior's path is to achieve physical and inner strength. Above all, young men and women are taught to protect and to care for their families and clans. They are taught to seek truth and knowledge and to adapt to changing times while maintaining the integrity of our ancient values. Wuch Yach is the last one, which is balance, maintaining spiritual and social balance and harmony. Wuch Yach must be maintained to ensure social and spiritual harmony, lest ill will goes wandering and causes harm. This governs interrelationships between the eagle and raven clans with other tribes, nations, and other institutions. Wuch Yach includes Kaya Awune, or respect for others, and At Ya Awune, or respect for all things.
To me, these core cultural values come across as being very deep in meaning and probably deserving of more attention specifically. However, that may be best saved for future discussion. We are so very grateful to Rosita Worrell for taking the time to share her insights with us for the purpose of generating a more in-depth understanding of the relationship between biocultural sovereignty, tourism, and Sealaska. However, we are now going to turn our attention back towards Goldbelt Incorporated to discuss how this Native corporation approaches tourism.
Goldbelt's main tourist attraction is the Mount Roberts aerial tramway. Locals just call it the tram, though. It's these gondola-type trams that take you up the side of the mountain, Mount Roberts. Up there's this really nice restaurant and a couple gift shops, classic tourist attraction stuff, but there's also this small theater which every 30 minutes or so or something like that plays this informational video on the native tribes and the land and how we have lived here since time immemorial and about how we plan to keep our traditions alive forever. At the top, there's this hiking trail that takes you to the crest of the mountain. The tram is only about halfway up the mountain, and you can actually take the trail all the way back down to downtown Juneau, too. The whole endeavor takes about 5 hours or so. The trail has a bunch of carvings in the trees of native artwork with different clan crests and the lovebird symbol and things like that. It's really beautiful. I think that it is a perfect way to get involved in the tourist industry while not going against Alaska Native values.
After hearing the knowledge and wisdom imparted by Rosita Worrell and having assessed various concepts, we now have a more in-depth understanding of the relationship between tourism, biocultural sovereignty, and Native corporations in Southeast Alaska. Now, with this in mind, how can the preservation of biocultural sovereignty and Native self-autonomy in this region be empowered going forward?
I think it's really important to realize that tourism has negative effects on the environment and also occasionally on our self-autonomy as Alaska Natives because it exploits our land in a way that doesn't always reflect on our indigenous values, but it's also virtually impossible to prohibit tourism in the area altogether. A very large percent of the city's income is from the tourist industry, and we would not be able to survive without it. In addition to that, buying out the multi-billion-dollar cruise ship industry to replace it with something that fits more with our tribal ideals is not really in our current realm of possibility. However, I do think that the corporations could really benefit from continuing their involvement and possibly even trying to be more involved, because tourism is largely used as a window for outsiders to look into our daily lives as people, and they get a brief introduction to our cultural history and beliefs, and it allows Native corporations to get monetary gain, which can be used for the prosperity of our people in the modern world.
Michaela and I are deeply appreciative of every individual who contributed to make this possible. We would now like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who took the time to listen to our podcast. We hope that you were able to gain something from the information discussed and maybe even have obtained an increased understanding of our world.
We would like to extend a very special gunaschish or thank you to Rosita Whirl for letting us interview her. Gunaschish to our tribal critical race theory professor Brooke Colley for being a wonderful teacher and mentor and for encouraging us to make this podcast. Gunaschish to my mom, Jody Mitchell. She is the vice chair for the board of directors for Sealaska Corporation. She helped me fact check this whole thing and gave me some background information. Gunaschish to Edwell John Jr. for giving us permission to use this music for our background music, as well as the Angoon Native dancers for performing the song in 2014 at A&B Hall. Gunaschish again to whoever is listening. We hope you had a great time.